Welcome to the fourth panel discussion of the day, where we're going to discuss responsible AI by design. We have a powerhouse of thinkers and innovators in the space from a variety of functional roles. So, you know for a fact you're going to get a diverse representation of this topic. Let's start introductions with speakers, panelists with Rebecca Greer, and we'll go down in alphabetical order.
Hi, everyone. This is the first time I've been first alphabetically by name ever in my life. So very surprised by that. I am a behavioral scientist, human factors user researcher. I've had many careers, many job titles, all doing the same thing, studying how humans interact with technology to make that technology as user friendly and as good for the world as possible.
Thank you, Rebecca. Rupa?
Hey everyone, so great to be here. My background is in product and UX design, and I have been working for the last 10 plus years helping tech companies and startups build applications that are user centered for AI and other emerging tech.
Thank you, Rupa. Savneet?
Hi everyone. I am a learning experience architect by profession and by passion. I am a tech ethicist and I'm a life coach in training. And I have been learning, researching, and writing about technology and ethics, emerging technologies, and all that for a while. And I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Jan?
Hi, everybody. So happy to be here. I'm a user researcher and the podcast host of Stupid Censored AI. Very glad to be part of this. Thank you.
Fantastic. Maybe we should lay a bit of the context and broader picture, and then maybe we can dive into some concrete examples. I know this panel is full of examples, so I'm excited to hear those. Um, let's start with responsibility. What is all that about, and how does that interplay with design?
So to me, throughout my career, I've said that I've helped to design socio-technical systems. And so a socio-technical one is one that helps humans to accomplish their goals in a way that is effective with satisfaction and efficient, and it doesn't do harm to any other humans. It considers the human as part of the entire system, and incorporates them and thinks about how they're going to react to the design, to the back end, and make sure that we reduce the amount of errors that could happen and badness that could happen.
Yeah, and to me, responsible AI is forward-looking approach, which is with an emphasis of end-to-end accountability of the system and processes. So we cannot have the system work in an ethical way and not talk about the processes or the application part of that. So it's like a wrapper that should go from beginning to end when we are talking about any kind of emerging technology. It's like more of an action oriented approach where you apply ethics, but I'll just say that one more time, it has to be end to end.
I would like to add to that answer. So, like, basically, normally what I say, and I'm iterating on the spot because I actually really like Savneet's answer. Normally, what I say to answer this question is that it's when you use AI and you create it with user research processes in mind, then you are creating responsible AI. But I'm also a chess player, and I think that like it's also good to think ahead, and that's where I'm iterating on my answer based off of what Sandeep said. That like basically, if you're thinking like not just where AI is right now, but like where it could be and where society will be in the future, second order, third order impacts, then you're going to be way more likely to have an ethical system.
Yeah. I would just add a little practical, aspect to this, which is despite all the competitive pressures that you have or whatever business goals that you're trying to achieve as a result of your AI applications, I think being responsible means slowing down and being mindful of the choices that you're making so that you're not, deprioritizing responsible AI principles like transparency or data privacy, etc., and fairness and bias mitigation. So just to call out that, make sure that you are incorporating and thinking about this now and before you start off, rather than as an afterthought in your entire process.
I think all these definitions are very complementary and symbiotic. I also think that this has a lot to do with accountability, because responsibility is being able to respond and be accountable. So, what does it mean to be working with something that is explainable or transparent or interpretable? Because I think that is part of the characteristics of a responsible AI system.
Yeah, so I can go ahead. So explainability refers to how of an AI system, whereas uh, we get to know that how it arrived on a particular output, and interpretability is why it why it produced something or generated something, that specific output. um, that's interpret. And then another level is intelligibility, where even the non-experts can understand. Of course, sure, somebody can say, oh, my system is explainable and you can interpret that, but then how can you explain that to me as a consumer, because I'm not a data scientist, or maybe I'm not the product manager, or or somebody else. So how would you explain that to consumer, your first audience, regulators, if you have any, the ethics board? So that all gets into, I think, these three major buckets.
In human factors, there's a. Go ahead, yeah.
No, you go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay, so basically in UX, there's this term called cognitive load, and I think it applies very well to explainability, because when we basically in layman's terms, when we simplify something enough that it's immediately intuitive and you don't have to think too much about it as you use the interface or the product or whatever you're trying to do, it just leaps out at you, then that's a good product. And I don't think that AI is any different. It's just another tool, and maybe it's a new tool to us, but it's still a tool. And if we apply the principles of cognitive load and just make sure that we make it as simple as possible, we probably will have achieved explainable and sort of interpretable AI.
So I agree with the cognitive load, which in human factors and behavioral science is called cognitive workload. But in addition, the ways to reduce cognitive workload and to increase interpretability and transparency are to consider situation awareness, which is how well do we how much of the world or a system's, how a system is working, how well can we see it, can we understand it, and can we predict what it's going to do in the future? You have situation awareness if you can do those three things. You don't have situation awareness or you have lesser situation awareness to the degree you're accurate on those three. The other one is a classic in human factors as well, called ecological interface design, based on the work of J.J. Gibson, which basically says that the interface should show the user how the system is working. And this isn't by saying, I'm doing this, or showing the code, but showing the relationships through configurable displays of, I'm taking information from here and here and here, and based on this, I'm guessing that we should do this. So that the human, going back to a socio-technical system, the human can tweak that and come up with something even better than what the machine can come up with or what the human can come up with on their own.
Why do we need it? Why do we need a responsible and explainable AI?
If we don't have responsible and explainable AI, bad stuff happens. And there are numerous cases going back decades of AI, not just LLMs, but computer vision and other technologies, but even LLMs, they have existed for decades. They're not something brand spanking new, but that they have made mistakes. I mean, I think the earliest mistake that I know of an AI making a mistake was on the TV show in the United States, Jeopardy, where Watson answered a Final Jeopardy question that just seemed completely bizarre. And anybody who remembers that show goes, what? But the coders it took them a while to figure out why did it make that mistake. But in Michigan, I want to say about 8 years ago, they were using machine learning to define fraud in people who are making unemployment claims for unemployment. And if it detected people incorrectly who were making claims, and these people lost money, they lost jobs, they lost all sorts of things, and their lives were essentially ruined because a computer made a mistake in interpreting because it was trained on bad data. More recently, Amazon was making hiring decisions based on AI, and only after a number of years of using this system did they discover that the AI had decided that female candidates were less hireable than male candidates because nobody was looking at why was it making the choices it was making as it was being trained. So you can ruin people's lives if you don't understand why the AI is working the way it's working.
Yeah, I think we should also. Sorry, go ahead, Jan.
So there's another system technology that's very much in the public eye, which is social media, and social media is now coming under the public lens in the last few years. But basically, this question was not asked as heavily as it should in social media, and now everyone could see the impact of what happens when we don't ask these sorts of questions of a new technology that comes out. And so I'm very eager to prevent us from to help us from not repeating those mistakes again with AI.
I think from a user trust perspective also, right? When AI is hard to understand, or users are not able to comprehend the reasoning or the logic or data sources used to make decisions, it's hard for them to trust those decisions. So in the context of maybe financial recommendations, medical prescriptions, and all these cutting edge applications for AI, user trust is paramount in adoption of AI. And every time, even for simple things like AI asking us, users asking a simple question to ChatGPT or Alexa and not getting the right answer, they believe that this AI system is not intelligent enough, and it erodes trust in the overall technology. And so, if we want to drive adoption of AI over sustained period of time, we need to think about user trust and how to earn that trust through responsible and explainable AI design.
Yeah, and this also, go ahead.
No, please. I'll go after you.
This also brings us, there is another concept, like, the important one, the black box systems, right? Just Rupa explained that. If it's closed, if you can't understand what, you just see things going in as in terms of data, and you don't know how it processed, but you just got the results. That way you cannot trust it because you can't see it. It's just black box, right? So that black box is something that makes people not believe the systems. And I just wanted to say here, in a firmer tone, that AI is not bad. It's just us human beings, the creators, the developers, the users. It's upon them. What AI is just a tool after all, right? It's just a tool. How you use it depends. The results are how you use it, right? And then I just wanted to add an example here. For example, there is a tool that's AI powered. It's a diagnostic tool because we are talking about health here. And it just finds a pattern in the medical reports, like blood report, the family history, or MRI, or any other kind of pathological thing that you have done with your doctor's office. And then it suddenly says that, okay, I am prone to heart attack. I'm not going to take the word for it because I didn't know, I don't understand how it got there. I don't want, maybe, my doctor wants to put me on the medication. Hey, you are prone to heart attack, and then here, take this, start taking this day one. So that lack of transparency in this decision making process would make me very, very suspicious, that how accurate that tool is, what is the reasoning behind that diagnosis. So it's just a little example of what Rupa, Rebecca, and Jan just said.
I think you brought up within this conversation, I've heard intelligence. I've heard trustworthiness, and I think those are elements where we acknowledge that there's information or misinformation or some sort of intellectual interface where we're giving information and getting information back, where we interpret and personalize these systems. But really, how do we trust a system if we don't know how it's built or how it's functioned, or how it functions? Pardon.
Sorry for keep going first. But in human, this is a topic I could go on and on for hours. In human factors, we call trust is the perceived reliability of the system and the user interface and how transparent it is. So if a person understands when it's going to make the right decisions, when it's not going to make the right decisions, it does so, that's right sizing trust. Humans can also have over trust in a system, which is that they use it and they don't check it. And that's when really bad stuff happens, is because no such thing as technology that's 100% reliable in 100% of conditions. You can get to 99.9999 in certain conditions, but not in all conditions. And then there is undertrust, and I have seen this in a previous career, where there could be a system that was designed and nobody understands why it used, and the few times they start to use it, it didn't work the way they expected it to, so they just have this box that their corporation said they have to use, but it's just sitting there and nobody's using it. And you right size the trust by providing that transparency to the user.
So design has come up a couple of times in this conversation. Savneet mentioned it, Rebecca mentioned it. I want to offer my take, which is that when we're talking about tools, not all tools are equally dangerous. A hammer is not as dangerous, let's say, as a gun. And the reason why is because, like, although both tools could be used to kill somebody, one is clearly designed for it and the other one is not. And so when we design tools to be more ethical, to be more responsible, we are reducing the danger in those tools. And so that's why this conversation is so important today.
Yeah, I mean, going back to that, so what about autonomous, like, or the weapons, those automatic weapons? Not saying the automatic, so probably I'm just not getting the word. The weapons, those work on AI where, you just don't need human beings interference. So of course, to your point, they are designed for that, to kill, which is not good. But all I'm saying is that it's important for us to understand how do we, as humanity, and I know Rebecca said it multiple times, it's socio-political, economic, like everyone is a stakeholder right now. How do we get it right, like right now? That's why this conference, right? That's why we all are here. That's why we are talking about this, so that we get it right here. And just wanted to address the original question was the misinformation, right? I did this little workshop at Georgia Tech where we got into the room and we looked at the data source for the local government, for the people those are evicted. So they just feed in data. It's like you and me just filling up the form. Probably I'm going to get 5 of those things wrong, and those forms are scanned and the data is sold to a third party, and that third party makes an app that people, for example, I have a house and I want to rent it out. I would use that app to make a decision if that person is reliable. And where am I getting that data from? From the forms. Those were filled at the county office. Probably half of them were incorrect. So the source of data was biased. The source of data was inaccurate. It was half poisoned, and we are making decisions based off that. So that's where it starts to trickle in, the misinformation, the wrong decision making, the black box thing.
Yeah, all great points. If we don't do responsible, explainable AI by design, bad things happen. So how do we keep the human in the center of all this design work, and how do we hold ourselves to human values?
As a user researcher in this team, in this panel, I would say that user research already has great methods that have been used for ages now. to understand users and to help keep users at the center. And I think that those methods work absolutely great for AI. There will need to be some adjustment, as there always is when if you're working in the finance industry, for instance. If you're using user research, you have to account for the regulation. In this case, when you're using user research for AI, we need to account for the fact that in the case of generative AI, it's not always repeatable. Rarely is it exactly repeatable in the same way, but it's not a new problem. Like, for instance, if we look at search, suddenly you mentioned that you work for Google, so search is a big part of what Google does. So like if you look at search, that's also the way that user research has been done for search would probably also apply to AI as well, because it's a similar problem with a similar kind of outcome.
This has been a problem since technology has gotten complicated. Human factors has been a science since the teens, actually, 1910s, so 110 years. But I mean, World War II had a lot of examples of technology being designed without humans, and then they called in behavioral scientists to create training programs, and those behavioral scientists said, your design is wrong. That's where skeuomorphism was invented, among other things. In the 70s, there were a number of plane crashes. They brought in behavioral scientists, human factors engineers, and because they had audited autopilot, and they said, so we don't need pilots anymore. The pilot can just sit back and do nothing in the autopilot. But again, that autopilot didn't work 100% of the time in 100% of the conditions. And the pilots had no way of knowing what was going on, and planes went boom. Not to be flippant about the loss of life, but it's, gallows humor. Anyway, so this is not a new problem. If I could wave a magic wand and be, I would say every engineer, every computer scientist had to take a human factors class to graduate from college, and that every company had to have a behavioral scientist on staff. But yeah, user research grew out of human factors. There are a ton of us out there with this information about, if we followed, not to the letter, but if we followed some of the guiding principles that exist in human factors user research. We did some iterations, and before we had a system and before we released it, we tested it and checked it to see what could go wrong. We'd save ourselves a lot of heartache.
I would actually urge new functions like engineering, data science, product design to wear these hats. I think it's almost a responsibility that we have. It's not an option anymore. So, putting some basic, balances and checks in the process, defining some guidelines, or working with folks who are experts in this space and saying, help us define a checklist or a framework. I think those are all very reasonable expectations, no matter what your function is. But the point is to just keep some of these aspects in mind as you start building your AI systems.
Right, and it's not only responsibility of the technology companies. I think people like us, those are just simply enthusiastic about this topic, should come in. Community leaders, they also have. I was just reading it somewhere how community of single dads came forward for one of the apps. I mean, people wouldn't think. I mean, single moms, we always say, but how about single dads? I mean, that's a big community too. So I'm just saying that different communities bring different perspective, but I'm not sure if it's appropriate to talk here, but I just wanted to talk about the ethics themselves. So when we talk about ethics, so here is an example. We say, okay, don't lie. Very simple. It's simple ethics, like don't lie. So when my son, who already consumed like probably 2 or 3 chocolates, when he walks to me and I'll say, oh, we are out of chocolate, so that's a lie, I have another bag of chocolate inside the pantry. So how do a machine understand that, okay, this is okay to say and this is not okay to say? So this conversation is also heating up amongst ethicists, that how does machine learn what is okay and when it's not okay? And that's, I think, also gives rise to another conversation, the good lies and the harmful lies. We were talking about social media when, during COVID, the government barged into the platforms and said, hey, please don't publish this kind of misinformation, and we can have total separate discussion on that. But government barged in and said, hey, don't publish that. Where is that line? So that is also something that is people are trying to figure out, how to teach a machine what is a good lie, what is a harmful lie. So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to open up these questions, something to think about. We talk about responsible AI and design around that.
Just to follow up on that, even adding another wrinkle and layer to that, is a lie requires a person know that they are not speaking the truth. But there are times when we don't know that we're not speaking the truth. Yeah. And journalists had a field day with this ethical question a few years ago. I'm not going to say any more about it. You can ping me after and I'll tell you the details. But that, you can't call somebody, they couldn't call somebody a liar because they didn't know if the person didn't know, or if the person knew the truth and was saying the difference. And so is that a lie? Is that speaking is that being uninformed? And then you have the good lie, bad lie. I know I'm saying a mistruth, but is it for a good reason or for a bad reason? It gets really complicated. It's not black and white.
It's
just double-clicking on that, Rebecca. Sorry, did I cut someone off?
I was just gonna say one thing. So it's like being uninformed, or spreading misinformation, or disinformation. So 3 aspects.
Yeah. I think that this complexity gets more and more weird and complex, right? So the truth for one community might be completely different from what truth looks like for someone else. How someone might feel sensitive about inclusion or representation might differ from people to people, and so it gets a lot more complex. And so I don't want to diminish the importance of folks who just work in this space and can help you navigate some of this complexity. But a lot of this is also common sense, folks. You don't really need, it's not rocket science to be able to think about who are we designing for, who are we building for. They're just humans like us, and they might have an impact that we need to think about. So you can definitely keep that in mind as you design your products.
Culture and politics can be taboo topics, but I think that when we're talking about ethics and AI, like it needs to be brought up. Because, for instance, marriage between a man and a man in the Middle East is taboo, right? Like it's against the law in many countries in the Middle East. I think maybe in all of them. I'm not aware. But basically, that's against cultural norms. When we're talking about cultural norms in India, where I lived for 9 years, that's also different from in the United States, and even within different parts of the United States, there are different cultural norms and things that are accepted. And so when we're talking about the user experience and like users having a positive experience, that's a factor, because like how you talk to a user from the Middle East will be very different from how you talk to a user from the United States for that reason. But also in terms of ethics, for the same reason, like what's illegal in one country might be legal in another. Marijuana, for instance, legal in many states in the United States, illegal in others, accepted, unaccepted. Like all these different things are things that are difficult for humans to navigate to begin with, and then when you're asking AI to navigate it, it's just going to multiply the challenges. So, but we have to consider them because that's our job.
I'll give you another end to that. So homosexuality being outlawed in some countries, acceptable in some countries. I live in Ireland. The outgoing TSIC or Prime Minister equivalent is gay. So
yes,
I appreciate that we're putting layers of complexity and what is deemed acceptable or not based on internal or external factors. Design is not just human factors, but also what does society deem to be acceptable, even if it's counterintuitive to human factors. So how do we proceed? I know Rebecca, you've been. I always see you write about this on LinkedIn and profess. This is not new. This is the same thing, just relabeled with a different thing. And Rupa saying the people that have the new label are or should try to put the hat on and be responsible to encourage these ethical decisions to be made. But now we just said ethics is subjective, and someone who thinks that they know better and that they can decide on behalf of other people rather than say the truth, because that is, not polarization, but different people have different motives, and the people that have the different motives construct things for other people. How do we move in that environment, and how do we engage in that environment?
Just because ethics is complex doesn't absolve us of our responsibility to keep in mind, what some of these responsible AI principles are. I think you can get away with someone interpreted your design in a way that you didn't intend to. That's very different from, we won't even think about or consider any of these principles as we, because we have to ship fast, or because we have to outcompete our competitors, or just because we don't have the resources. I think that's what I would like to at least bring forward is, it's a responsibility, and the complexity of ethics should not become an excuse for us to not take that seriously.
I would also go forward with the fact that a key component of designing a good system in good user experience or good human factors is that it's specified users with specified goals in a specified context. So a system can be user friendly and be ethical and be good in one context and be horrible in another context.
Yeah.
Again, no such thing as something that's 100% reliable, 100% good in all of the contexts. You have to know where is this going to be used, what it's going to be used. And in some cases, you have to localize or change what you're designing to fit a different culture or a different context or a different set of users. It's very, very hard to make something that's user-friendly for everyone. I think of the IKEA instructions. I personally love the IKEA instructions. They don't have instructions. They've done this so that they can use the same instructions in every country. I can follow them. I have friends who can't follow them because they need words. And then you go onto the IKEA website and you get the version with the words. But you specified users doing specified things in specified contexts.
Yeah, and then also, the question is, how do we train our systems in ethics? So it probably can be top down and bottom up. Like we talked about bottom up, like don't lie. You just, kind of when you are designing the system, don't lie, don't kill people, don't abuse people, don't use cuss words. So basics like bottom up. And then top down is another way when you kind of you're using some online Gen AI tools. You give thumbs up, you give thumbs down. So all those are because cultures are different, people are different, context is different. So that's how the training is being done in both ways. But then also sometimes we because it's too much going on, I'll just give example of elections. So some of the Gen AI tools, those are available freely, they were not generating when you ask a specific question around UK election, France election, India elections, or US elections for that matter, they are not giving much information because at the back end they are not allowed because of whatever controversy is going on. So it is like both way driven. What is happening in the society, technology definitely is affected by that.
So what are those? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to quickly piggyback on what Savneet said. Savneet brought up training with a thumbs up and the thumbs down. That's something that we have talked about on the Human Centered AI show, where we talked about so one of the things that I'm doing right now is I'm training the models. I'm working as a data annotator, so that means that I help train these models. And we talked about how data annotators are hired. And it does not seem to be any kind of process that makes sure that data annotators are trained as conversational designers, or they're trained in ethics like Savneet is. But this also goes to the consumers as well. When you're asking consumers to put a thumbs up or a thumbs down, do we think that the consumers know what's worth putting a thumbs up or a thumbs down on? So I have questions about whether how much that makes sense or not. And even if someone who is trained like myself, I remember I was having a conversation with ChatGPT about user research, and ChatGPT gave me some advice, and I didn't agree with that advice at the time. And then months later, I came back to that conversation, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, ChatGPT was right. all along. But at the time, I had given that conversation a thumbs down because I didn't agree with the advice. But months later, when I went back and I reviewed it, I was like, wow, ChatGPT was right. And so my point is that when we're training these models, like we're fallible as well, and we need to have sort of good systems, good processes, good ops to make sure that ethics is part of the system. And design ops, research ops has been considering this for a while now, so we don't have to start from scratch. I know ethicists have been as well, and so like maybe if we put our heads together, we can come up with better solutions for training.
In the previous conversation, the previous panel discussion, we were talking about the different motivators in designing AI systems. Some of it is commercial, some of it is cultural, some of it is ethical, moral. But at the end of the day, when you're competing commercially, you can't show everything that has gone into your private recipe, and that's part of the complexity behind it. But how can you fully trust something that is a black box? You don't know how it was made. You just have to trust that it's apple pie with cinnamon. You don't know if they put anchovies. You don't know what they put in there. Maybe you're allergic. Who knows? It's what they say on the label. What are the risks and pitfalls of that? Working with designed products that don't have a layer of transparency.
It's just, what we talked about first is the loss of user trust, because if you can't see, so one of the AI led system, I would say AI led system was COMPAS, COMPAS, by some of the police departments in US. So I'm not sure how much of that was implemented, but that was used to predict the likelihood of somebody being a criminal or likelihood of somebody committing a crime. So, I mean, I have huge doubt in a system like that. It is just predicting the likelihood of what if, I'm just thinking about something. This is like an over example, but I'm just saying that can't be a criminal, or the background, my gender, my background, my culture, or the part of the area I live in, the city, or the school I go to, they cannot be decision thing. They can be decision maker. The parameters those went into that AI system that can make those decisions. So of course, lives would be at risk. People would lose trust in each other and in technology too, I guess.
If humans are flawed and biased by nature, and we design based on our biases, what kind of oversight mechanisms do we employ to course correct our own biases?
You don't have just one person. You have multiple people, and looking at it in multiple stages. And I want to go back to your ingredients example, because I like nobody is saying you have to reveal all how you cook the pie. We are just saying you need to show the list of ingredients, which is what pie manufacturers have to do. They have to say these are the things that went in, but they don't have to say I put this much of this thing in. They don't have to say I mixed these ingredients in this order. They don't have to say I chilled it or I cooked it at what level, at temperature. They're just saying I used these pieces of information or I used these ingredients to make the pie. So you don't have to give away the store and still be transparent.
Yeah.
I would like to add, so I have a very old answer to this question. I think that like if we go back in time, to when people had religions with many gods, right? I guess people still do, but back in the day when it was more common, there was a fear of the dark. And why did people fear the dark? Because it was unknown. And so when we have things that are unknown, they're going to cause fear. They're going to cause discomfort. And right now, millions of people are using AI, and we still do not completely understand it. And I think that if we expect people to not fear AI, given what we know about how people feel about the unknown, I think that that's an unreasonable expectation. And so if we want to remove that fear, we have to explain it.
But then also, the actions of bad actors, like deep fake is like huge topic these days. How things are like moving around, those are like totally AI generated. You don't know who to trust. Is that picture from Israel Hamas war even true? So all those things also add up because of the unknown, right? Because what I'm looking at, if I'm not a critical thinker, or probably I don't have media literacy, I cannot distinguish between a deep fake, or I'm just saying that it just adds up.
Yeah. I also think that sometimes humans don't react to bad things or irresponsible choices because it doesn't impact them, right? If I am not a creative person who created a Picasso like painting and my art isn't getting stolen, I don't care about somebody else's art getting stolen in the context of generative AI. But suddenly my photographs are being stolen and I get worried about it. So I think building that empathy of how our choices are impacting others so that we are not okay if it happens to someone else, we're not okay if it happens to us. I think that's something we can drive awareness at a consumer level as well.
Empathy is a powerful answer, I think.
I think this leads us to just further expand the definition of AI. I know AI has been conflated with generative AI and ChatGPT and these models, but artificial intelligence includes machine learning, so mathematical algorithms, and symbolic artificial intelligence, knowledge, reasoning, and representation. But yeah, there's other tools like natural language processing, computer vision. I know that's something that we wanted to cover a little bit about, and how when you create these systems that incorporate some sort of sensor, whether it's a camera or whether it's something else, how do we make sure that that's not a biased system?
So I really like there's a method in user research called radical participatory design, and what that refers to is like having the users involved, not just like when we're conducting the user research, but have them throughout the whole process, from the beginning to the end. When we're doing the study design, when we're doing the research report, we have the participants involved the whole way. Now, I'm not sure if that's what was required to create this kind of ethical system with computer vision, but it seems like I think it would certainly be helpful. How far like right now, computer vision is the way that it's going from an ethical perspective is deeply concerning to me, and I think that we definitely need some counterbalancing to bring it back with the many stories. Which hopefully our audience is aware of in the news media about the direction of computer vision and how it's biased against people with darker skin, biased against women, biased against all these different groups that we don't want to harm. But yet, right now it's harming because we have not involved users at the center of the process. And so, computer vision is a good example of what happens when the technology is not human centered. And so, we need to start compensating for that.
I agree with everything just said, but it also you have to embrace diversity and the misfits. Instead of just having the yes men who say this is a good idea, you have to allow people and you have to encourage people to say, will it work in this situation? Will it work in this situation? And then test that situation over and over again. And also having people who have diverse backgrounds and who think diversely. I think there's a thing called red hats in the military where, people sit there and go, how can I beat this system? I know that there was a computer vision system, I think, that was defeated because people decided not. A team was asked to defeat it, and they thought of very creative ways to defeat it. And they only had to figure out one way to fail it, whereas it had to be right 100 times. So you need people, instead of looking for evidence to say how great it is, you need to look for people and saying, where is this going to fail? And that doesn't mean that that's a bad system when it fails in that situation. It's just that you then say, it doesn't work in this situation. And is that a bad thing, or is that something that we can a thing we can accept, and a set of conditions we can say in user requirements or in something else that, hey, it works in this situation but not in this situation? and communicate that to the user.
And that
And
also
iterate, because
Yeah.
iteration is such a big part of UX design. Like if we come across something that could be improved on, where the system failed, we can always just iterate and improve it. So we could do.
this brings
Oh.
sorry, I just wanted to mention one wonderful thing. When I think Apple Watch came out like long time back, it did not have way to track menstrual cycles, so half of the population was already out. They were not users, so it also increases the consumer base and trust in the products. I think that's just a basic thing to do.
Yeah.
Manuela Santos wrote in a different chat. Rebecca's earlier example mentioned computer made a mistake, and I have seen the statement repeated for some time. What do you think about the possibility of using the term augmented intelligence instead of artificial intelligence? What I mean is, professionals sometimes want to absolve themselves of the result of AI's decisions, and they don't want to assume responsibility for them relying on that mechanism.
I mean, I doubt we're going to change it to augmented intelligence. I would rather we were using things like generative large language models or computer vision, the terms that those people who've been working in the area used, but we don't. And it's too late to put that genie back in the bottle, unfortunately. But I wanted to say that it is human nature, when something bad happens, to find something to blame.
Blame on.
And I am glad, and happy to see the computer made a mistake rather than user error as the final decision as to what went wrong. Those plane crashes in the 70s were all bucketed as pilot error. And the pilot made the error, yeah, but because they made a logical decision, or they couldn't possibly understand what was going on in the time frame that they needed to make a response. So no human in the planet wants to make an error unless they have malfeasance, and that's a whole other set of circumstances. But if a human makes a mistake, it's because something in that environment, something in their organization, something in the technology led them to think that this was the right decision to go forward with. And so I am so happy that we are actually able to say the computer made a mistake rather than the human using the computer was at fault.
I 100% agree with Rebecca. I think a great point that illustrates this, like how right she is that there's a heuristic that one of the 10 key heuristics when we're talking about UX, which is accounting for user error. And so every good product has to account for user error and has to mitigate user errors. And so we like by thinking about this as a heuristic, we're actually putting it within our responsibilities as the designers, as the researchers, to prevent these errors from happening, and it becomes our responsibility. And I feel like that's the right way to think about it.
But I think Manuela has a great point here as well, is that how we have been positioning AI, from Alan Turing, who's been toying with the idea of can machines think like humans, and positioning AI as, it is basically a replication of your brain, how it functions, and we are building technology to kind of take that capability outside of humans, right? That gap is pretty wide. In terms of what we can do today with tools, everyday tools that have been positioned as AI tools, because companies want to monetize or want to provide premium capability and build that hype up that we are as innovative as others. In that process, we are losing track of the fact that this is not all the same AI that has been hyped up as replicating the human brain and the nervous system. That's something I think awareness is needed, definitely.
I think it's fascinating you brought up Alan Turing, and the Turing test as being considered not a great test anymore. But it actually goes all the way back to Descartes. Descartes described the human brain as being a hydraulic system, because hydraulics were the state of the art of technology in Descartes' time. Every time there's a technological advance, we say, oh, this is how the human brain works. And it never is. So I am less concerned. I mean, like, I if I got to rule the world, as I've said twice now, I wouldn't have called it artificial intelligence, but the genie's out of the bottle. And so the more we can educate folks about the limits, and that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Once again, I very much agree with Rebecca. I remember when the hype started with ChatGPT. Noam Chomsky put up an opinion piece in the New York Times, like doing like a brilliant takedown of why generative AI does not think like a human at all. And so, like, I recommend to our listeners, like, I don't want to butcher that. Please go read it because he does a really great job of explaining why it's not human.
We should not forget the word artificial in this phrase, right?
Yeah, and where's that
Absolutely.
artificial coming from? Who's the designer behind that and their motivations or the extent of their knowledge? We made some other examples prior to starting the panel discussion. I think the Amazon hiring decisions was one. Rebecca, I think you were talking about how uh, algorithms were biased and that led to unintended consequences.
I think I mentioned it even before here, but yeah, Amazon. I don't remember the details and I don't remember the year, but I think it was Amazon, and they were making hiring decisions based on generative AI, and it turned out that the generative AI had found no reason why people who were hired were hired other than their gender, and so anybody who went through that generative AI hiring process was screened out if they were a woman, and it took Amazon quite a while to realize that that was happening, and who knows how many smart women didn't get hired at Amazon while this was being figured out.
Um,
Sorry, go ahead.
I also wanted to add something. When we are training our models, so when you talk to a data scientist, for example, I'll just take some weird example, because I was just reading about that. So it was about hiring male nurses in a GYN office, OBGYN office, right? So what is the likelihood of getting selected as a male nurse in these offices, medical offices? Very, very low, because it has been like that, the culture has been like that, the history has been like that. Not that, they are less efficient, but if you talk to a data scientist, they would say, oh, we are doing what is there, like I didn't do it, this is what it exists, it's based on what data we have collected. Because in a OBGYN office there are only less than 1% of male nurses. Oh yes, perfect, yeah, because they didn't do anything wrong, they just replicated. So that is another way of enhancing these biases, because data scientists or the designers or people those are training the data, they're saying we are just doing what is happening in the society, we are not doing anything wrong. But we need to go a step before that. If it's happening in the society which is unbiased or not correct, how do we fix it at that point? Not it comes much before, when you kind of select data to train your model on. Am I making sense? Okay, awesome.
I think we also wanted to cover a little bit about the.
Before we move on, sorry. So we recently on my show we had a guest come on, and the focus of the episode was recruitment and using AI for recruitment. And I feel like this is a very timely topic because right now, as we speak, recruitment teams are being reduced. Recruiters are being laid off, and generative AI in many cases is being used for recruitment right now. And there's no way that this is not negatively impacting the candidate experience, but there's very little that can be done because there's so few recruiters and they're doing such an enormous amount of work. And so recruiters are placed in a different position, and there's no way that the lives are not being affected. The wrong people are, the right people are being missed for the right jobs because of these generative AIs. And so this is something that is like being scaled up, if anything, in this current time. The Amazon example is now happening everywhere.
And now that you bring up the medical field, no two people are alike. Based on ethnicity, based on age, based on geolocation, there's different nuances to our biology, and it's not possible right now to personalize medical treatment with limited understanding of how we behave and what drug interactions we have and what sort of genes we have. But that doesn't stop people from trying to adapt models that have been trained on particular groups of people and implemented across all different kinds of hospital systems. Um, any thoughts on that? Navigating responsible design of healthcare AI systems?
I'm going to start with a positive because we've been so negative on AI. They're actually, and I don't remember the details, unfortunately. I collect stories. But there was a piece of technology, a computer vision system that was designed to help a bakery in Japan identify pastries to put the prices on them. And it worked, but then it was used in a medical setting, and it actually detected cancer better than radar radiologists, a certain kind of cancer. So there are things that happen, but you have to know what you're looking for, and you have to have very clear metrics on it. And I think that's the key thing, is knowing, defining very well what is success, what is failure, and defining all of the failure conditions. There are lots of opportunities for AI to work well, but with certain use cases, but in other use cases, they can't work well. You need to understand what those use cases are. Thinking of diagnostics is finding the best diagnosticians that there are and asking them why they're diagnosing things the way they are, why they're catching things, and comparing that to the trainees, to med students, and figuring out where that difference is. This is an old human factors technique called the gap analysis. There is also lots of opportunities in looking for cures for orphan diseases. So those that don't have very many people who have those diseases, and looking for the markers and figuring them out. And classifying them better than we can, and detecting them better, and then creating drug trials for those better than we can. But there is a tremendous amount of risk in that we have to define clearly what is success, what is failure.
And I would say that, this is a very, very important point, because we are talking about human in the loop, which when we were talking about artificial intelligence, So it is really important for us to understand that human in the loop is really important. I mean, yes, we can let AI work on its own where it's benign, right? But in situations like this, we really need human in the loop, who can make the final decision. But yes, 100% agree to what Rebecca said.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you were asking earlier, Wakan, in terms of how do we make sure we are not biased in the first place. And if you look at all the data, that the research that has been done in this field, right? Whether someone's telling you that this drug has worked for 90% of the people and the risk is only 1%, most likely that research has been done on white population, mostly male population. So how much can we rely existing research, because that itself is biased? And then using that research data to train AI models, we are further, expanding the risk out there. So how do we make sure that we are using the right data and, thinking about bias mitigation early in the process? And if you just go even beyond medical science, simple things like nutrition, right? This is kale is great for digestion, blah, blah, blah. And then it turns out that it only works for certain demographics or certain cultures. It doesn't apply to others. And so we've got like a long pole when it comes to nutrition science, health, wellness, and medicine, where we are relying on data that is already biased in many ways.
Can I just say something? I can't stop sharing this. So one of the most wonderful thing I have read on Instagram like 2-3 years ago, what makes kale the superfood? And the answer was its marketing team.
Yeah.
So I think that like when we're talking about human-centered design, like often the knee-jerk reaction that we have is to keep humans at the center of the process, and I think that's still absolutely right when we talk about healthcare systems and AI in healthcare. But I think that a key stakeholder, at the very least, should be medical doctors. Medical doctors have always been interested in patient care and behaving ethically. Good doctors always are empathetic and they care about their patients. They've spent years learning about patient care. And so as we design these systems, it's going to be absolutely crucial to speak to doctors and to speak to many medical doctors of many specialties to make sure that.
I'll just add that the licensing agencies in the United States, the FDA, and those in Europe actually require you do human factors and user testing, both generative and evaluative, throughout the process for anything that is going to be used in a medical setting.
How do you tell that line between responsibility upfront and due diligence upfront versus innovation and go to market?
Oh, I love this question because the fact is that part of the reason that Apple products were so innovative during the Steve Jobs era is that Steve Jobs audited a class on typography that was basically a form of human factors, understanding how fonts can impact reading. And that led him to thinking about how tools, and when he created the iPod, it was, he had a problem he wanted to solve. When he worked on the first Apples, he was insistent that there be certain features because he's like, what's the point of a word processing tool if it doesn't have these features? If you truly are human-centered, you are going to be incredibly innovative. The typewriter, which became the keyboard, was created because a countess was quite the gossip, and friends, she didn't want to write scandalous emails by dictating them to her maid. She wanted to actually write them, and her friends missed her letters. So her brother and a friend created the typewriter so she could write the letters without dictating them. Email was created because Vern Cerf, I think I butchered his name and I apologize because I know he's well known and his name just escaped my head. But he is partially deaf. His wife's fully deaf. His wife couldn't call him at the office and say, I need you to buy a carton of milk on the way home. So he invented email so that he could have those conversations with his wife. When you focus on a human problem, you are innovative.
An example of that is also the COVID vaccine. I know we have been talking about how AI is good. So that's another place where I see the time from research to actually deploying the COVID vaccine was reduced by, I don't know how many hundreds time, because so much of the steps of combination and permutation of different chemicals to create that vaccine was reduced to a couple 100%. I don't have numbers on top of my head, just because we were using some kind of mathematical things at the back end, and people came in. There is this game synthesis where the protein game, probably you might have heard about that. It's called, I think, synthesis, where you combine different proteins to help solve for some kind of diseases. So those kind of practices came in that really help accelerate the production or the invention. I don't know if that's the right word for COVID vaccine, but yeah.
Rupa, you were gonna weigh in?
No, I just I don't have much to add to this.
Okay. What about what use cases would you say you're currently tackling that might carry responsibility forward?
I think sorry.
I was just saying, as part of the teaching work that I do, I run into so many different folks who are, either doing startups or in corporate environments trying to build AI applications. And I wanted to connect back to what Rebecca was saying earlier. A lot of times, folks are trying to make the human life better, either improve their productivity or make things a bit less friction for them. So I'm seeing a lot of these use cases where you're thinking about augmenting again, not replacing, and that's, I think, a responsible use case in the first place. What I'm really excited about is where AI can, truly help innovations like faster vaccine creation or better medical diagnosis, early detection of cancer, things like that. To me, I'm not a medical professional, but that's what excites me the most, is where we can truly leverage the potential of AI, not think about how we can replace people and full-time workers. To me, that's more responsible as a society, as an industry, to think about where we can augment human value rather than replace it.
This is so much, to the point. I was about to say that I'm passionate about environment, and I see huge potential
Yeah.
of AI, in the sense of predicting the drought, predicting floods, predicting landslides, those kind of things. And there was something very beautiful I came across 2 days ago. There is this app is being developed, where local restaurants or food joints, they can say that we have some food left over, and people, those who need food, they could I mean, it's like there is another side of that. People those don't have place to live or food to eat, how would they use app? But well, that's separate discussion. But they could tap into that app and see where around them they can get free food. So just a very simple application, but this is all going to be very helpful.
What are some actionable takeaways from this conversation that lean teams that are championing responsible design as a proactive measure?
I would say start with a basic checklist, like define your own design principles around responsible AI development. Start with a checklist. Have discussions early on in the process. Make sure that you're all signing up for at least putting thought behind and being mindful about doing the right thing. That should not be an afterthought, and it should be early part of the process. I think that's a great starting point. If a lot of the teams that I have seen working on AI applications just started thinking that we need to be responsible and bake that into their processes, we would see a huge dent in the universe.
And I could speak from the perspective of consumers slash users, how they use systems, because there is so much, like, Yan, you remember, you mentioned about New York Times. I read another article where some of the tech company and New York Times having some kind of lawsuit going on where they use their intellectual whatever. So how as a consumer and user we use products, how as users we respond to all of these AI related tools is really important. Social media could be one of them. I mentioned in my session on Wednesday that how the small steps, the small things that we do responsibly make a huge difference.
I think the easiest thing for people to take, I kind of already said take a human factors class, but the easiest thing is to reward people for saying what's going wrong, and to actually have regular sessions where you say, how can this fail? It's 6 months from launch of this feature and it failed. What went wrong? Why? And thinking about those things, not to be negative, but I know people say, oh, you have to be optimistic all the time. It's not, it is being optimistic. It's saying, I want to help us avoid these failures. So encouraging people to do that and having actual sessions where you do that as a group and brainstorm all of the things that can go wrong, and then designing mitigation for those. Or at least going, is that a real risk? Or how is that a risk we're willing to accept? In the medical device space, that's actually in lots of regulated industries, power industry, automotive, military. It is a part of the design process. It's called the failure mode effects analysis. Very long name, but it basically means, how can this go wrong and what can we do? How big a risk is it, and what can we do to prevent the biggest, baddest risks?
Are there no guidelines that are readily available through international quality standards or things like that?
The failure modes effects analysis, yes, you can find lots of documents on how to do them, and such, especially for those regulated industries. There's templates, but it all boils down to what exactly are the failure modes depend on the technology you're designing, and how it's different from other things. And it's just really about sitting there and going, if I want to if I wanted to be bad and break this, how would I use it? Or thinking about, what if, oh, I have this power supply. What happens if I don't have this power? What happens if I put this, if, I stupid human, no humans are stupid, but I am distracted and I plug this into the wrong thing. How bad can that be? I mean, that's physical and that's more in that regulated space, but you can do the same thing with AI. How, if this how do I prevent this algorithm from picking up a specious correlation and using that to make decisions?
Wonderful. Well, I think we're drawing near the end of the time, but I think we uncovered quite a bit on don't do bad things, keep morality, keep diversity, keep a proactive checklist in mind as a forefront, brainstorm what could potentially catastrophically go wrong before it happens and plan accordingly. Um, Even if you try to go to market quickly, if you skip any of these steps, you're in for liability and lawsuits and unintended consequences. So it's cheaper to go slow than to go fast and break things, which may have unintended consequences, even possibly death for people, right?
I can't remember which country is a Scandinavian one, but they have a saying, no shortcuts today, I'm in a hurry. That if you skip a step, you actually could cause yourself to be less efficient.
Slow is fast, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you all. And we're going to take a momentary break. We'll be back at 4 p.m. for the final panel discussion. Again, it's been lovely speaking with you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great chatting with all of
Thank
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.